Hey everyone, my name is Kelly, and today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about hydrocephalus. I'll be going into the etiology of the disease, the course of the disease, some of the signs and symptoms that we see, as well as the medical and physical therapy managements, and some interventions we can do to help those and treat those with hydrocephalus. So the etiology of the disease is just basically an excessive amount of the cerebrospinal fluid within the cranial cavity. It literally means water on the brain, and it's also classified into either communicating or non-communicating, and can also be congenital or acquired. Now, we do have some subcategories that go along with hydrocephalus. It can be ex vacuo and normal pressure. Now, I couldn't really find much on the ex vacuo, but normal pressure is definitely a common type of hydrocephalus, so we'll definitely be going into more detail about that. Now, this video that I have posted here is one of the 2-minute neuroscience videos that I found on YouTube, and he basically just goes into more basic detail of hydrocephalus and the specific structures that are involved. I think he does a really good job, so if you want to, if you have time, go ahead and take a look at that. Some signs and symptoms of hydrocephalus is obviously an accumulation of the CSF in the brain. That can also lead to increased intracranial pressure, which the normal is about 4 to 15. And then the following signs and symptoms go hand in hand with what's called normal pressure hydrocephaly, and we'll get a little bit more into detail about that later on in the presentation. But these can definitely have a huge impact on your treatment with patients with hydrocephalus. All right. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to go over with the increased intracranial pressure. Now, this increased pressure can cause blockage of the blood flow, so it definitely can lead to ischemic damage within the brain, and that could be very detrimental to the patient. All right, the course of the disease can either be acquired or congenital. Congenital being developed in the womb, right at birth, or just after birth. So it's typically chronic. So patients with hydrocephalus are dealing with lifelong symptoms and complications sometimes. And it's also could be idiopathic. So not knowing really the origin of how it developed. And it could be caused by trauma. So that's the normal pressure hydrocephalus, which we'll get into these separately. Okay, so communicating and non-communicating, the differences between those. So the communicating is just no blockage, no obstruction within the ventricles, but it's just that the CSF is not readily absorbed. That means that involving too much CSF and causing too much pressure on that. Now, non-communicating, it does involve a blockage of the CSF, which causes the ventricles to dilate, and so that can definitely cause more increased pressure inside the brain as well. So the congenital hydrocephalus is basically, it could be formed inside the womb, right at birth, or just a little bit after birth. And so I have a picture here that illustrates a very straightforward picture of congenital hydrocephalus. Now, most of these cases are caused by genetics. Most of them aren't, and it's mainly managed with shunt placement. And later on in the PowerPoint, I'll be going over how those shunts are placed specifically. So next is acquired hydrocephalus. Now this is developed at birth, or it could develop later on in life, and it may be caused by an injury or disease. So I have this illustration here I found on the Hydrocephalus Association website, and it just basically describes how common it is. Now, it does say down here that every 15 minutes that somebody is actually having brain surgery due to hydrocephalus. So this just tells you that it's, very common. There's no cure. It's got many factors that could cause the hydrocephalus. So those signs and symptoms that I described earlier have to do with this normal pressure hydrocephalus. So the pressure inside the brain cavity, or the cranial cavity, is normal within the 4 to 15, and it only happens in adults, and it's mainly like I said, it's only in adults most of the time, and patients sometimes do not see full recovery from the shunt, only because it is normal pressure. The ventricles fill up and expand, not causing any problems to the brain tissue itself, just the ventricles. And so they actually have very common symptoms relating to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, so that lethargy, the ataxia, the gait disturbances, and especially the tremors. So this could actually lead to a misdiagnosis of the Parkinson's. So the symptoms you present with are Parkinsonian related, and so they just, they actually say that, the patient could have Parkinson's, when really they do have the normal pressure hydrocephalus. So that could be detrimental to the treatment of the patient, especially medical treatment. All right, so the method of diagnosis, you're looking at CT scans, MRIs, ultrasounds, and I thought that it was really neat that you could actually place a shunt or an intracranial pressure measurement, and so they can actually measure the pressure of inside the cranial cavity, and to see that if that pressure is going down or going back to normal. And so this is just one way that they kind of keep track of the pressure to see of the hydrocephalus. So medical management, obviously they could have a surgical correction, a shunt. So I'll show you that shunt placement here. Okay, so they go right under the xiphoid process and incise that, placing a tube and incising in the back of the head right here, and then having the shunt placed inside the ventricles here. And so that's how it would drain, this kind of monkey tail looking tube that inserts through underneath that xiphoid process. The patient could also have an endoscopic third ventriculostomy, whatever. So this is actually just drainage of the third ventricle endoscopically. So they could also have a lumbar puncture just to relieve the pressure off the spinal canal, and as well as oral medication, specifically diuretics. We know that diuretics, that they treat excess fluids, so that's how they manage the fluid buildup inside the cranial cavity. And finally, some physical therapy management interventions. We definitely want to work on gait and coordination, balance and coordination, that could also ultimately lead to improved gait and reduce the risk of falls. So you can see here in the illustration that this is a very high level patient. He is balancing on that Bosu ball, getting really good proprioception in. But we mainly want to work on mobility so that the patient does not have as many falls. All right, here's all of my sources. You can go to these websites here. These are articles that you can copy and paste into the taskbar or the toolbar up top in the web. And that's it. Thank you.